What if, in helping people regain the ability to see mental images, you suddenly discovered that their memories were replacing your own life? The reverse empathy syndrome of Dr. Cameron. Seattle. Evening descends slowly, bathing the clinic's windows in soft orange light. Alex Cameron, a neuropsychologist with a tired smile, is wrapping up his last consultation of the day. Outside, a drizzle falls, as familiar as white noise accompanying his thoughts. On the couch opposite sits his new patient, a man in his 40s with a darted look and a trace of wariness in every movement. He has aphantasia, a total inability to visualize mental images. For most people, the world of imagination exists by default. For him, there is only emptiness. Alex connects the patient to a neurostimulator, a prototype he developed to awaken visual associations. The procedure is painless. The device's quiet hum, a smooth flow of impulses, a controlled immersion into memories. The patient is asked to imagine a cup of coffee, the face of a loved one, morning light filtering through curtains. But instead of the expected first visual experience, the man flinches. His eyes grow distant, his lips murmuring something barely audible. Alex raises the volume on the recording. The words are blurry, but he makes out snow, crunch underfoot, a wooden door with a carved pattern, a red child's mitten on the railing. "Is that your memory?" Alex asks gently. "No," the patient replies, still staring at the empty space before him. "I've never been there, but it feels so real, like I'm standing inside it." And he blinks, as if returning. "You were there too. Not now. Before." A faint tremor stirs in Alex's temples, as though something inside his skull is vibrating imperceptibly. He has never been to snowy places, never seen that door, and certainly never held a child's mitten. His fingers automatically check the equipment settings. Everything is functioning normally. The patient suddenly grips the armrests. "You showed me this. It's from your head, isn't it?" Alex tries to deny it, but the words stick. For a second, he thinks he hears the crunch of snow beneath boots himself. When the patient leaves, only the hum of rain and the growing tremor in his temples remain. Alex realizes something has gone wrong. The patient didn't receive his first images. He had transmitted his own, and perhaps not for the first time. A week after the incident with his first patient, Alex had almost convinced himself it was a fluke, but flukes don't call 3 times in 2 days. First came a middle-aged woman, an accountant. After therapy, she described standing on the roof of a tall building, smelling smoke. She had never been higher than the 5th floor and was terrified of heights. Then came a student who saw a village wedding, an old barn, a 4-piece band, the smell of freshly baked bread. He insisted he had no such memory, yet spoke of it with absolute certainty, as if he had lived it. That same day, heading home, Alex experienced a strange lapse. In the clinic hallway, he met his colleague Michael and, without thinking, called him John. The slip seemed trivial until another followed. Once outside, he walked not toward his own home, but to a different neighborhood, convinced it was the right way. Alex began keeping a separate journal, patient names, session dates, and detailed descriptions of visions. The more he wrote, the clearer it became. These were not random images. The memories differed, yet certain elements recurred. A dark figure in the background, the same carved wooden door the first patient had described, or a faint, repeated melody in the distance. In his technical notes, he speculated the cause might be cross-memory reconsolidation. Stimulation via transcranial alternating current stimulation, TACS, was replicating neural traces, engrams, not only in the patient, but also in the operator himself. These traces could flow back, like data through a bidirectional channel. One morning, he ran into Tom Hayes, a former patient from a year ago. Tom had come without an appointment, just to say hello. But spotting the journal, he froze. That barn, he pointed at a page. I grew up there. That's my memory. Where did you get it? A chill settled in Alex's gut. If Tom was right, then the wedding the student had seen wasn't his own. It belonged to Tom. That evening, Alex dug out old patient archives. Leafing through the pages, he found more and more matches. Everything pointed to one fact. His mind had become a storage vault and an active transmitter of other people's memories. As the rain began again outside, he knew this wasn't a series of isolated incidents. It was contagion, and he was the source. By mid-month, Alex's journal looked less like medical records and more like a short story collection. He recorded each patient's memories in detail: time of day, smells, moods, colors. But on rereading, he began to feel something unsettling. Some scenes felt familiar. He remembered writing them down from the patient's words, yet often found himself seeing the episodes as if he'd lived them. A little girl in a yellow raincoat splashing through puddles. Alex knew her name was Lily, though no patient had mentioned it. A gray-templed man slicing bread at a wooden table. Alex could recall the taste, though he'd never eaten it. He decided to test his theory. First, he ran a session using the standard protocol, but replaced himself with a mannequin rigged to simulate breathing and skin warmth. The patient reported, "I see nothing, just darkness." The next day, with Alex operating, the same patient immediately described a vivid, detailed scene. His notes led him to a working theory. The neurostimulator loop included the operator as an active element. The device calibrated to his neural patterns, especially the mironeuron network responsible for replaying experiences. Prolonged operation had turned Alex into a dominant hub, a center capable of recording and retransmitting memory traces, engrams, from one patient to another. He called Ellen Reeves, a colleague and former project partner. They had once co-authored the stimulator's first concept, arguing late into the night until diverging in opinion. Ellen had always dismissed empathic effects as side phenomena. "You're finding mysticism in engineering again," she said after hearing his account. "But this goes beyond that. If your theory's right, you've become part of the system, and it can write into you as easily as you write into a hard drive." Alex stayed silent. For him, it was no longer a theory. He had become the storage, and the archive inside him was growing each day, like a living network with no off switch. Alex increasingly felt he was no longer alone in his own head. His days resembled a stack of overlapping films, frames from other people's lives flashing in his mind like a faulty projector, then fading, leaving a viscous sense of déjà vu. He tried to impose order. The journal was split into sections: family scenes, traumatic events, joyful moments, neutral. Each fragment got a code linked to a presumed owner. A metaphor formed. He was a gateway node in a complex network, branching into clusters: weddings and funerals, births and wartime deaths, fresh bread smells and post-fire smoke. But indexing the archive was impossible. Memories shifted, gaining new details never present before, as if the network was running a background sync, rewriting the data. Escalation came during a group session. 3 unrelated patients fell silent at the same moment, then began describing the same scene: an abandoned railway station, empty benches, rails vanishing into fog. Their details matched perfectly: cracked mosaic tiles, rusted clock with no hands, the same quiet melody that had surfaced in other visions. One patient panicked, hyperventilating. Another, after leaving the clinic, ran into the street without noticing a car. The driver braked just in time. Alone afterward, Alex understood. This was no longer just fragment transfer. This was a network, with him as the central hub, and the patients as terminals plugged into a shared collective unconscious. Yet there was temptation in the chaos. Sometimes, without warning, floods of bright, happy episodes washed over him. A summer by the sea he had never visited, the embrace of a lover whose face he didn't know, running through a vineyard in the rain. These moments were so vivid and full that for a second he wished to stay there forever, living hundreds of lives instead of one. But when the visions faded, emptiness returned, along with the realization that his own life was slipping away, dissolving into other stories. Alex spent the morning at his computer, analyzing journal entries and session audio files. With each comparison, he found more overlaps between patients' memories and the fragments surfacing in his own mind. This wasn't illusion or burnout. He was truly losing his own memories, replaced by others. He began self-testing. First, associations. List 10 words meaningful to him. Half evoked nothing, as if they belonged to someone else. Then, facial recognition. Photos of loved ones appeared on screen. A smiling woman's face should have sparked warmth, but instead there was nothing. He didn't know who she was. Then he tried recalling his mother's face. Eyes closed, focusing. But instead of her features, he saw a village wedding. A long table under a canopy, fresh bread's aroma, guests' laughter. He even felt a warm hand on his shoulder. But it wasn't his life. A dull ache rose, like grief for something unnamed. That evening, he met with Ellen Reeves. They had once spent nights in the lab, saving the project, writing grant proposals to the point of exhaustion. A brief romance had passed between them, never spoken of again, but still flickering in her eyes at times. "You know what I have to say," she began. "That I'm dangerous to patients and to yourself. I saw your chart. In 1 month, you've lost nearly 30% of associations, 40% of faces, a third of routes. Keep this up, and in 2 weeks, you'll be a shell." She looked away. "There's a way. I can take over as operator. But then, Alex, I might share your fate." "I can't agree to that," he said sharply, "and I can't watch you vanish. But we don't have much time. Decide." Days became a blur of headaches and sudden blackouts. Alex could start his morning holding a coffee cup and the next moment wake up in the middle of the street, unaware of how he'd gotten there. With Ellen, they reviewed every option. 1. Close the practice and isolate himself. But even without patience, the network in him would keep rewriting his identity. 2. Partial wipe or filter. Tests showed network resonance wouldn't let him remove only the foreign. It would take all or nothing. 3. Transfer operator role to Ellen. Technically possible, but with an almost certain risk she'd follow his path. "You could at least consider it," she said. "Live in isolation, without new links. That's not life. That's waiting for the end." The night before the procedure, he let himself sink into the archive, like a warm bath. The flashes came fast. Summer in a vineyard under rain, a newborn's first cry, dawn in the mountains, a long dance in a hall scented with vanilla. These moments were more vivid than any memory of his own. For a second, he thought, what if I stayed here, lived hundreds of lives instead of one? But the next morning, the final patient arrived, a boy of about 10 with severe aphantasia. During the session, a torrent of alien images crashed into him, making him cry and cover his ears, whispering, "Make it stop." Alex knew, if he continued, he would harm people. The procedure room was sterile and still. Electrodes cooled his temples. Before him lay a small note. "For my future self. If you're reading this, it means I chose to be an empty vessel." "Ready?" Ellen asked. A faint plea to stop trembled in her voice. "No," he admitted, "but start anyway." The impulses came gently. First, the recent days vanished. Then, years. Faces, voices, smells, dissolved like watercolor in rain. The last thing he saw was his reflection in the device's glass, a face already unrecognizable. Inside, silence. And he knew there was no more choice, because the chooser no longer existed. Morning was quiet. Through the clinic's wide window, diffused light fell onto the floor and an empty chair opposite the desk. Alex, or the person now called Alex, sat studying his hands. They seemed foreign, long fingers, pale veins, a faint scar at the base of the thumb. He knew it was his body, but had no memory of how he'd gotten the scar, or of who he had been. A knock at the door. A young woman stood there with a boy of about 8. She introduced herself, said she'd heard of his therapy, that her son couldn't see mental images. There was a trace of hope in her voice. Alex invited them in. As he set up the equipment, the boy stared at the wall mirror and softly hummed a melody. Alex froze. It was the same quiet, honey-toned tune from many patients' visions. "Where did you hear that?" Alex asked. "Don't know," the boy shrugged. "It just came into my head." The session went smoothly. The impulses were gentle, and the child began describing what he saw for the first time. An old wooden door with a carved pattern, sunlight beyond it. Alex listened, feeling nothing, yet his hand rose to his temple and lingered there a moment. He didn't notice. Afterward, the woman thanked him, and at the door, the boy said quietly, "I think you see something too." Alone again, Alex looked into the mirror. The face staring back was calm, the eyes clear, but they held no stories. And yet, in that gaze, there was readiness. Not a personality, but a function, a service needed by others. He touched the glass. It was cold. In that cold, he felt a strange peace. The emptiness inside wasn't absolute. It could be filled again, but never by him.